Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Welcome to our 93rd installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Vaeschanan, a packed parsha. First talks about by giving charge to Yoshua, to Joshua, that he's going to take the Jewish people into the land. And we also have the Ten Commandments, so there's a lot to speak about. So we're going to pick one aspect to speak about, and that is in chapter 3, verse 29. It says, so we abode in the valley over against Beit Peor. Right, Beit Peor meaning the house of Peor. Peor was an idol. That was worshipped in a very strange kind of way. It was worshipped in a way where you defecated in front of it. That was the way it was worshipped. Rashi says that this idol, right, where the Jewish people were close where this idol was worshipped. And even so, that the Jewish people heard the laws, right? They heard the laws of what they're supposed to keep. Everything, Rashi says, seems to be, if they do tshuva, if they repent, God will, forgive them. In this case, right, I don't have the merit to forgive. Now, the question is why. So it says, Mori v'Rebbe, Arav Agon Ramoshster Mokshlita, in Tam V'das, may he be well. He explains like this, that the Jewish people dwelt nearby, and what was their kavanah? So their kavanah was to embarrass this idol, right? There is a mitzvah, most people probably not aware, but there is a mitzvah to make fun of idolatry, right? To show that it doesn't have any meaning, that it doesn't have any power. So you might say, wow, why should I be allowed to speak against it? It's not showing respect. Says the Torah, you don't have to show respect. There is no mitzvah whatsoever to show honor, certainly not, or to show any respect for any form, for any form of idolatry, for heresy, right? For heresy, you don't have to be so open-minded till your brains fall on the floor. Give everyone their day. Give everyone their opinion. Right? Judaism definitely doesn't hold of that. A heretic, you just shut them up. You don't even allow them to speak. Right? Even if they went somewhere to speak, you could heckle them down. Right? The desecration of God's name? No. Why is it not a desecration of God's name? Because their words don't need to be heard. Right? Idolatry. By giving it, quote-unquote, credibility, that's what you're doing. Right? So, there's a mitzvah to make fun of it. At all levels. Not Lashon Hara, right? Not Motzei Shemra, it's not, causing him to have a bad name. It's idolatry. Right? It's certainly one of the big three every Jew has to give up their life for. Right? The other two being immorality and murder. So, anytime, any place, right? You'd have to give up your life rather than transgress this. But, idolatry is pretty severe. Definitely pretty severe. So, as we mentioned before, it's a mitzvah to make fun of it. So, my Rebbe points out, even if a person's intention was to embarrass the idol, and what's a good way to embarrass the idol? Good way to embarrass the idol is to what? Is defecate in front of it. Right? Nothing worse than that. Certainly nothing worse than that. But they sin doing that. Why is it considered a sin? Because they're making fun of the idol. It's a sin for one very simple reason. That's the way they served the idol. So therefore you might say, well, I'm making fun of it. What do I care if that's the way they served it? Answer is because if they served it in that way, regardless of what I do, people look at it and say, oh, he's serving the idol. It doesn't matter what your intention is. Right? It has nothing to do with what your intention is. The fact that that's the way they served it, it's Torah prohibition. So this is forbidden according to the Torah. So a person shouldn't say, well, you know what? I'm going to paskin a new halacha. I'm going to make up a new law. And I'm going to make up a new custom according to my own understanding. That's what I'm going to do. Comes along the Torah and says, no, we have to keep the Torah according to its laws, according to its details, because it was passed down from God to Moshe Mount Sinai. Now, once the Jewish people agreed to listen to these laws, so then, therefore, God is going to have compassion. God will look to the side, so to speak, and He will atone. He will atone for what they have done. So, we'll speak about that aspect in a second. I just want to get to the last part here. So, Rebbe here says that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't allowed to bring the Jewish people in. But once the Jewish people sanctify themselves, purify themselves, enter the land in order to establish the mitzvahs like they should be, it's fitting that God gave them the Torah. So therefore, a person's got an obligation to learn and understand, right? To have tremendous, understanding of what the Torah wants from us, and to do the right thing, to help us and to serve Him, in order to fix up the sin by what they did by Pa'or. And the fact that God didn't listen to them, and then He atoned for their sin because of what they did. Now, first question really is the beginning, and that is, what's so bad here? What is so bad? The reality is, they defecate in front of the idol. I would say, based on my own understanding, for what it's worth, who cares what they did? They made fun of the idol, right? It's a mitzvah to make fun of the idol, like we mentioned before. If it's a mitzvah to make fun of it, and they defecate, there's no greater making fun of an idol than that, right? Poop in front of it, that's pretty bad, right? Certainly pretty bad. So why in the world does God hold it against them? Why should it be held against them? And the answer is, because that's the way they served it. And if that's the way they served it, it doesn't matter what your intention is. Therefore, even if you had the greatest intention, you're going to make fun of it by doing this in front of it, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So, what my Rebbe here points out, we've spoken about, but I think it's always good to harp on things that we already know, just to reinforce. And that is that why are you not allowed to defecate in front of that idol? And so we said, that's the way they served it. Torah says, do not serve their idols in the way that they serve them, regardless if your intention is to make fun of it. Because if that's the way they served it, according to the Torah, it's forbidden. But you might tell me, I understand. Right? In my puny logic, I understand that what? That I'm making fun of it. If I'm making fun of it, what's the problem? Right? Catch 22. Because the Torah said so. Good. But if I understand it, my own understanding, right? The Rebbe here points out, that's the problem. It's not according to what we understand. It's not what we think. It's what the Torah declares. Right? It's the written word of God passed down to Moshe himself, who passed it down to us. Right? So that Torah has to be understood. That's why we have an oral tradition. Right? Oral tradition goes hand in hand. If I didn't have an oral tradition over here, I would think that if you defecate in front of this idol, what do I care how he serves it? Intention is everything. Come along the rabbis and say, no, something as sacred or something as important as idolatry and severe as idolatry, there are ways to serve it. There are different ways you can transgress. That's why, if there's an idol, if there be a statue of JC that people worship, person dropped $50 or $100 or a dime, and he bows down, gets on his knee to pick it up. Usher, you're not allowed to do it. Why are you not allowed to do it? Because it looks like you're serving the idol. So I would say, okay, let's look around. There are 100 people around there. Let's take a survey. How many people think I'm worshiping the idol? Say I. How many people don't think I'm worshiping the idol? Put your hands up. Say I. Well, still against everybody. So, looks like I win. So, the majority of people would probably say, of course you're not worshiping the idol. You have no intention to worship the idol. What are you doing? You're picking up your dime, your $50, whatever it is. Comes on the oral tradition. An oral tradition says there are different ways to serve an idol. One way to serve an idol is to get on all fours. Right? To bend down. Or get on all twos if you're a human. Right? You're bending that's a faux pas there. You can't get on all fours because you are, you're human. Unless you, get on your hands, right? But bowing down doesn't necessarily mean getting on all fours. Right? It just means, bending down. Depends how far down, whatever. But it doesn't have to be you're necessarily on the ground. But, if you bow over enough that it looks like you're worshiping the idol, that's forbidden. I had $50. So what if it fell in front of an idol? I have absolutely zero intention. So my own understanding, and this is exactly the point, my own understanding would be, why should it be forbidden? Why is the Torah going to jump up and down and say it's forbidden? Because it looks like I'm serving the idol. What do I care what it looks like? Everybody knows, or I'll make clear, what my intention is. What if a person was bending down? Person's bending down to pick up the money. They're bending down to pick up the money. And what happens? They make a declaration before they bend down. Everybody, whoever's here, I am not worshiping the idol. I got $50 here, it's mine. I'm picking it up. Would that be enough? So I would think that should be enough. But the way it looks, regardless of what my intention is, not enough. Therefore, it's a Torah prohibition. Even if your intention is just to pick up my $50. So my Rebbe here points out an extremely important point, and that is, you cannot go according to your own understanding. Going according to your own understanding is a mistake. It's an absolute mistake. Because who are we to think we know more than the Torah? Who are we to think we know more than the rabbis of previous generations? So, you look at the Reform and Conservative movements, what have they done? They've done exactly that, according to their own understanding. End result, been a disaster. All right, we're just after Tisha B'Av. So I'll make a very blatant point over here that I think should clarify even further. And that is the following. The Talmud tells us that any generation, a generation passes, and the temple is still not rebuilt. So it's brought down that we, in that generation, whatever generation that is, it's as if we destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. We destroyed the temple in our time. I might think we've been in exile for 2,000 years. There were people much greater than us in the last 2,000 years could have seen the temple rebuilt, but obviously it wasn't. So why should I think what I do matters? Why should I think there's no collective responsibility? Because you might say, well, that happened 2,000 years ago, and because it happened 2,000 years ago, I'm exempt. Why would the Talmud say such a thing? Why would the Talmud say any generation hasn't rebuilt as if you destroyed it? Why is it my fault? I wasn't there. Even if we all came collectively out of Adam HaRishon, we came out from the first man, so technically all Jews were there at Mount Sinai, all the souls were there, and then, they trickled down generations, for future generations. Be that as it may, I wasn't there, right? I personally, or maybe my soul was there, but I wasn't there. I'm 2,000 years later. Why in the world should Talmud say that if you didn't rebuild it in your generations, as if you destroyed it? The simple answer is that there's a collective responsibility. If the temple wasn't built, you say, well, it's their fault. Right? Look at that previous generation. 2,000 years ago when they got exiled. It's their fault. Sinas chinam, right? Unlawful hatred, one to another. Lashon hara, speaking badly against others. Number of reasons why the temple is destroyed. So what happened to the future? What happened to later generations? Why wasn't those sins fixed up in order that the Gula Shlema, the final redemption, should come? So I'll tell you very simply, because they didn't deserve it. Because those future generations still messed it up. And if they still messed it up, you can't say, well, it's not their responsibility. You don't have anything to worry about. That's a crock. It's a crock for a very simple reason. Because if you go generation after generation, don't tell me just because we're not on the same level. Well, if we were on the higher level, maybe we could have brought about the building of the temple. Yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. But we're not at that level. So what? So does that mean whatever I do has no meaning? Does that mean that if I make a crummy blessing, I can take it back? I can't take it back. No, I can't repent on that. I made a crummy blessing. I fulfilled my obligation, but it's not the optimal. I shouldn't take responsibility for that. My actions, I shouldn't have to take responsibility. Why not? People don't understand that, yes, we're a soul and a body. Right? Our soul comes from God Himself. Each person has their own message. Each person has their own potential to reach. That may be true. So that means that they can only fulfill their own obligation. Whatever that soul is doing here in this world. No one else can fulfill that. So if I don't fulfill that to a certain level, forget what everybody else does. My portion in that world is bad. It can have tremendous negative effects in the physical world and in the spiritual world. Now, if that's true, then I take responsibility for what I have done. Torah is all about reward and punishment. Second paragraph of the Shema that speaks about if I do what God wants, rain will come. If not, then God forbid there'll be disasters. There'll be famine. And all that. So you might say, well, that's only that generation. What does that have to do with me? And the answer is, we're all part of it together. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lezeh. All Jewish people are related. We have one thing in common. We're Jews. So if people don't do what they should be doing, it's collective responsibility. Get it? Collective responsibility. That means that if I, God forbid, do something wrong, it can affect other Jews as well. You might say, oh, that's not true. It affects you. Really? If a person steals from someone else and they get caught, and they spend 10 years in jail, and they have to spend thousands of dollars on lawyers and whatever, you can say, well, that just affects me. What are you, selfish? What are you, an idiot? Totally not true. It doesn't just affect you. It affects your family. Affects your kids. If you have kids, it's definitely going to affect you, no question. But it's got other repercussions. You stole from other people. Right? You caused them problems. It's not just that whatever I do doesn't matter. So, there will be people that will be affected directly. Right? Parents, family, kids, people they stole from. There might be other repercussions as well. But there's something also just as severe. And that is, what about me or that person vis-a-vis the rest of Jewish people? So you might say, what about it? So if I mess up, or a person, let's say better, person messes up. If all the Jewish people are related one to another, and we're all connected, what that means is there could be collective punishment. It's not just individual punishment over here. It may be in some ways, but it could manifest itself, in a massively public role. You could have a few bad eggs that cause God's wrath to go crazy. I mean, you could have many bad eggs. Depends how God sees it. Depends how bad the action is, or whatever the case is. But a person, I guess has got my ire a little bit, because what it seems to say is, if the temple wasn't rebuilt in your day, while you're still alive, you don't have anything to worry about. It's kind of like JC came to the world, you got nothing to worry about. Now, I don't think that's what they meant, right? But it means you don't have to take responsibility for what you do. That's, God's going to cut you some slack. So then explain to me what that piece of Talmud means. Is it figurative? Doesn't say, it doesn't say, you definitely did it. It's as if. You're going to say, see? It's as if you didn't do it. Now, my Webster definition, as if, means like you did it. Right? It's like you're guilty. Are you guilty 100%? You going to call me on it? No, you're not guilty 100%. But you're not guiltless either. It's more to the side of being guilty than being guiltless. So, Kaufman's law is, you are not going, in this situation, to pass the buck. Right? The Christians pass the buck. It's all about someone who came and died for your sins. That's great. That means I don't have to do diddly squat. I say a few prayers, go to my priest, confess a little bit. That's it. No collective punishment. Don't pass go. Don't collect 200. Doesn't matter what I do. Right? Someone came and died for all that. That's a tremendous thing. Totally anti-Jewish. Has no connection to Judaism whatsoever, obviously. So, when we look at the destruction of the temple, and we see this piece of Talmud, so collectively as a generation, we still haven't learned the lesson. Because if we did what we're supposed to do, a generation, whenever that would be, now, or 100 years ago, 500 years ago, or 50 years in the future, whatever it is, one generation is going to merit the coming of the Messiah and the rebuilding of the temple. That's one of the things the Messiah has to do. That being the case, then you have to tell me that that generation was worthy. That generation got it. Even if it's a weaker generation. Right? It's not an impossibility. It seems like an impossibility, right? But obviously, obviously it's not. We have to put our best foot forward. And by putting our best foot forward, that means we have to work on these things of why the temple was destroyed. But do not say, do not tell anyone, you know what? You got nothing to worry about. God's going to wipe your slate clean. Who says? Who says he's going to wipe the slate clean? Even if there were greater rabbis in previous generations, they didn't have the merit, to see the coming of the Messiah. Okay, I get it. They're much greater. True. Well, if they couldn't bring it, how can we bring it? That's not the question. The question is, I have to live and do what I need to do. We need to get the lesson straight. We need to understand. We can't hate anyone for no reason. We can't just speak about somebody even if we feel like it, unless certain conditions are met. It caused the destruction to the temple for a reason. Right? The rabbis weren't stupid when, God forbid, when they said, unlawful hatred, etc., caused the destruction. It makes sense because of the severity of what it does. Even if it's true, even if everybody knows it, doesn't give you the right to malign someone else. Again, you have to know what the halachas are. You have to learn the laws to know when you're allowed to speak, when you're not allowed to speak. The great Chofetz Chaim, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, may his name be blessed, wrote a book called Shmiras HaLashon, Guarding Your Tongue. People said, you're not allowing us to speak. Chofetz Chaim said, not true. I didn't say not allowed to speak. I just said you have to learn how to speak. Right? And if that was the main reason why the temple was destroyed, then that means we haven't got the lesson. Even though, people learn every day, the laws of Lashon Hara, what you're allowed to say, not allowed to say, how you're allowed to say it, and all that. That's a great thing. That is the mitzvah of this generation. Right? Very true. At the same time, we still have to work harder. We still haven't got to the point where we're deserving to be redeemed. If we haven't deserved to be redeemed, what does that say? Does that say pass the buck? No. What that says is, at some level, you're also liable. Because if we do exactly what we need to do on a collective basis is also important. Because what individuals do affects them, but affects the entire community. It affects the entire Jewish people. So that being said, person's got to be careful everything they do. True. But every generation, even if it gets weaker than the previous generation, still has the ability, to bring about the Messiah. Messiah is born on Tisha B'Av. There's a Messiah in every generation. Question is, does that generation merit for the Messiah to reveal himself? So let's ask again. What does that tell you? If a Messiah is born in every generation, and the Messiah in every generation knows who he is, he can only reveal himself when God tells him. And he could die in the process. Right? Then there'll be another Messiah. Right? That next generation will have that spark of the Messiah. Right? He may die, and another one may die, and until the Messiah is going to come. But if he doesn't come in that generation, he's ready to come. He's at the gates. He's ready to come. But God says, no, not yet. No, not yet. Why isn't he allowing him to come? You can't say it's because look what the previous generations did. This has nothing to do with the previous generations. This has to do with us right now. So you might say, well, if you look at the Dor Dea, the generation that saw God face to face, and they wandered around for 40 years, and then eventually, they died out, and everyone else entered the land. Right? So, but they went around China for 40 years. So you might think it's going to take a long time for God to mete out this punishment, and until the Jewish people are ready, and then he'll do it. Right? But that's pretty much a cop-out also. Yeah, it could happen. Like by the sin of the golden calf, God didn't mete out justice straight away because he would have killed everybody. So every generation there's payback. Right? There's payback for the sin of the golden calf. But it doesn't say over there that because of the sin of the golden calf, the Messiah can't come. It doesn't say that we're all exempt. It just says that the punishment is not going to be collective at once. It will be collective, though, for all generations. Now, you might say, this is the same question. So you might say, well, that's not fair. That's totally not fair. Because, we're 3,000 generations later. Or we're 2,000 years later. So 2,000 or more, 4,500 years later, that we are, we're after the fact. What does that have to do with me? Why does God have to bring out his wrath on my generation? This happened 2,500 years ago. Answer: Because if God would have gone amongst the Jewish people, instead of sending an angel, a messenger in front of him, meaning to the Jewish people to guide them, on their way. If God would have gone amongst the Jewish people, there wouldn't be Jewish people today. You wouldn't be wasting your time watching this video. It'd be very simple. But God said, if I go amongst the Jewish people, they'll all be destroyed. So what was the compromise? Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to make a compromise. He doesn't want the Jewish people to be wiped out. So fine, what's the compromise? Compromise is that the Jewish people will be allowed to survive. And the reason they'll be allowed to survive is because God will mete out punishments in each generation for the sin of the golden calf. Because if he didn't do that, and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't convince them, and he wouldn't have had that patience, Jewish people would be no longer in this world. And we'd all agree that was bad. Right? That would be bad. So we see there's an idea of collective punishment, even for future generations, of something I don't have a part in. I didn't have a part in the sin of the golden calf. It's done by the Erev Rav. I'm not connected to the Erev Rav. It's a mixed multitude. It wasn't my fault. So in that case, God says, doesn't matter if it wasn't your fault. This is a decree. This is a decree that's made in front of me. And that's not exactly the same. Maybe it's a little bit different than looking at the decree that God was going to destroy and destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, that God destroyed the temple. Nonetheless, even though he destroyed the temple, why did the temple not get rebuilt in future generations? So you will say, well, we'd have great people. Could be. Then you don't have to tell me it's as if I had not built it. So, at the end of the day, it's a divine decree. As my Rebbe here points out, he says many times, we bring this up many times, and that is, it doesn't matter what I think. It has nothing to do with my IQ. It has to do with the fact that it's a divine decree. That's it. Finished. So for someone to come along and say, don't worry, you have nothing to do with this. No, it's a divine decree. And if the temple doesn't exist, we have responsibility. Because if we don't rebuild it, why is God going to cut us some slack? Why is God going to say, well, you lived in a lower generation, really wasn't fair, I'm going to be a masochist, I'm going to wipe you out anyway in the next world. I'm giving you all the opportunity to try and bring the Jewish people together in order to rebuild my temple, but obviously certain things haven't been met. Why should I not have that responsibility? Right? It definitely sounds, to me, and I can be totally off here, but it sounds like, you have more important things to worry about. Now, God's not going to hold you responsible for that. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case. Because, as the Talmud says, this Talmud's not giving advice over here. It's not like, wow, let's give a nice parable. Right? Let's give a nice parable, give people something to think about. The Talmud, with the Torah is about absolute truth. It's about absolute truth that doesn't change. Not based on what I think. So now we have to understand. If the Talmud says that someone who doesn't rebuild the temple in their generation, if they don't see it rebuilt in their generations, if they destroyed it because they didn't help enough to help rebuild it. There are things that have to be done. If they're not done, criteria is not met, it's game over. Why should there not be collective punishment? It's not about people don't keep Torah mitzvahs. That's 90% of the Jewish people. I mean, that can certainly get God's ire, I understand. But most of these people are going to be wiped off the face of the map spiritually. Certainly through ignorance and intermarriage. Right? Most of them will be wiped out. So, that being the case, most of these people never learned anything in their lives. They have no idea what Torah is. It's like being born as a potato farmer in Idaho. Right? No offense to anyone who's a potato farmer or lived in Idaho. Right? So, if they were born in Idaho, they don't know anything. All they know is potatoes. So, God's going to cut them some slack. Yes, He will. You're not going to cut them all the slack. You're not going to make them totally exempt. They're still going to have to pay. When they transgress the laws of Shabbos, they're going to pay. Not like they did it on purpose, but they're still going to have to pay. So they're doing their own thing. So it's up to us to try and educate them, but we can't save everybody. Right? That seems like an impossibility. Right? We can save some people. So we have to be out there trying to educate others, trying to bring them around, trying to get them to understand, what the Torah is, and not give in, and not give in to apathy. Most people just don't care. It doesn't matter. So really the onus is not on them. It's kind of like trying to start a Jeep with a 9-volt. You cannot start a Jeep with a 9-volt. Yeah, you can try it. Go ahead, try it. It's not going to work. Right? So, the Jewish people are collectively responsible. But someone who's brain dead, and they stay brain dead, and people can't wake them up from being brain dead, okay. But we the ones that know, we the ones that understand what the Torah wants, we have greater responsibility. So therefore, we have to work 10 times harder. We have to strive not to speak badly against others, not to cause desecration of God's name, not to, defame others, certainly when it's forbidden. You're going to find out when it's permissible. That'd be fun. But, in general, all these things, we have to work hard staying away from. You're going to tell someone, the most important question they ask in their lifetime is if I put peanut butter, if I put mustard or ketchup on my hot dog. These are the great philosophers of this day. They don't know anything. They have absolutely no idea about anything. It doesn't mean they won't be responsible. They just won't be responsible as someone who rebelled against God on purpose. They could rebel on God, against God on purpose if their life depended on it. Because they don't know anything. They don't know enough to rebel. They just say, I don't want it. I don't want to inconvenience my life. It's not about rebellion. It's about living a certain life. It's all about desire. It's all about honor. It's all about money. It has nothing to do with Torah. It has nothing to do with Judaism. They want to be left alone. They just want to live their life and, live it up as much as they can. Eat, drink, and marry, lest tomorrow I die. That's what they want. So, collectively that's bad for the Jewish people in general. 100%. Right? Causes a major stain if 90%, of world Jewry can barely read the alphabets, if that. So, these people, unfortunately, many of them, spiritually, they'll be wiped off the face of the map. 60-70% intermarriage rate, that's it, they're finished. Next, one generation, finished. So, the real onus is not on them. Cannot be on them, logically speaking. Because again, they're too busy thinking about whether I'm going to put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog. So how can they be responsible for the spirituality of the world? They, again, they will be responsible up to a point. But the real onus is not on them. The real onus, is on the Orthodox community. That's where the onus is. And however you want to define Orthodox. Right? Modern, more modern, less modern, ultra-Orthodox, whatever it is. It's our responsibility to fulfill the mitzvahs the best we can. To do everything the best we can. By doing that, that's going to draw us closer to God. It's going to draw God closer to us. Right? That's going to make change in the world. An Orthodox Jew stands in line, waits his turn, doesn't push, doesn't shove. People say, very nice, he's friendly. Makes a tremendous sanctification of God's name, an unbelievable Kiddush Hashem. That person's loud, person's obnoxious, they have a kippah on their head, right? They wear a yarmulke, they push in line, they do other things. Makes a desecration of God's name. People say, that's Torah, right? That's Torah I should emulate. And then they get caught for fraud, they get caught for other things. It makes everybody look bad. Alright, the Germans didn't care. As long as you had German blood, as long as you had Jewish blood, Could have been your father's side, could have been from your dog's side. Doesn't matter. Jewish blood, that's it. You go to the gas chambers. Secular Jews went ballistic during the war. They couldn't understand. Take this Orthodox Jew. I'm just like you. I fought in your wars. I ate your sandwiches. Go to your gymnasiums. I marry your women. Like, what's the problem? You're a Jew. Next. They didn't care. They didn't make any distinction. Payas, no payas. Beard, no beard. You're a Jew. That's it. So, there is collective damage. 100%. And just make it a little stronger. A secular Jew who gets caught for fraud or gets caught for something else, okay. He's a Jew, he got caught, whatever the case is. But does the world say, oh, those Jews, some may, plenty of anti-Semites out there, they won't matter. They won't care. And they'll start, saying all these negative things, against Jews because a secular Jew got caught. An ultra-Orthodox Jew gets caught. All right, that's already big news. I mean, it happens more and more. Right? But, compared to the secular world, right, still not as great. But even so, he's an Orthodox Jew. He's supposed to be held by the word, by the word of God. Look what he does. I'm not going to say it's right. Obviously, the person's guilty. Can't say it's right. Is that what God wants? Of course not. But everyone's got an evil inclination. But you Orthodox Jews aren't supposed to do that. You're right. People aren't supposed to smoke. People aren't supposed to gamble. People aren't supposed to womanize. You're right. There are plenty of things you're not allowed to do. Well, if you do that, how can you call yourself an Orthodox Jew? That's a good question. Just because people do things and they look the way they do, big black hat, long black coat, it doesn't mean anything. That's just externals. That's just the community that they identify with. But they're human like anybody else. People can be bribed. People can go astray. Not saying it's right. But it should be a heck of a lot less than in the secular world. And the reason is very simple. Because we're attached to Torah. When you're attached to Torah, the more you're connected to your past history, the less you're going to go astray. Right? So the mass majority of the time it works. Not because it's a cult, not because we're brainwashed, right? Maybe because we have horns, but, we're not brainwashed. It's not a cult. Anyone can opt out at any time. Everybody's got free will. Question is, why does it work? Think about why it works. Why is, divorce rate in the Orthodox community, 1/6 of the national rate? There's got to be a reason that there's 6 times as many as secular people getting divorced than Orthodox Jews. You're going to say, Orthodox Jews don't believe in divorce. Not true. Torah states clear. This is what you do when you get divorced. Does God want you to get divorced? No. Do we exchange our spouses like we exchange our shirts? Why change our shirt? No, you got to work on it. Marriage is difficult. You have to work hard. Many ups and downs. Last thing we want to do is throw out a marriage. If you have to, and it can't be fixed, you throw it out. Right? You throw it out. But Orthodox Jews don't get divorced. Again, it's not true. See, people come up with all kinds of excuses. That's all they are. They're excuses to put us down. Say, oh, they do this and it's a cult and they can't. You understand how Torah works? No. So I would say shut your big mouth. You got a big mouth, shut it. Because you have no right to speak of what you don't know about. Learn it, practice it, then get back to me. We'll have a discussion. But you want to talk outside your elbow? Okay, that's all you're doing. Because you don't know. And even as we said over here, you can't think things because of your own understanding. The way the Torah works is not according to our own understanding. Just about everything. Right? Just about everything. So here's my Rebbe points out, again, it's not about what we think. And people say, people will say the Torah this, Torah's against this. Yeah, there are things the Torah's against. And the Torah says it's forbidden. Right? Forbidden relationships, forbidden things you're not allowed to eat. Plenty of things. So it's not, oh, you're like this. No, I am like this because that's what the Torah tells me to do. You're going to say, who says the Torah is right? Okay, we can have a discussion. What makes the Torah true? Right? That's not for now. But people say, well, my own understanding is just as good. Now, in theory, maybe I'll tell you you're right. Even though I just spent the last 40 minutes saying that's not true. Right? But let's understand. Where has man's thoughts and understanding gone in the world? Has it made more people moral? Has it made them upstanding people? Is there anything binding them besides the threat of going to jail, right, if you get caught of doing things? So, I don't think there's any binding system out there that has the ability to produce moral people if they're left alone, not enticed, etc., in order to perpetuate it. Because once you start going according to your own understanding, that's called Torah made in my own mind. And Torah made in my own mind does not succeed. It's an impossibility. It will not happen. Therefore, going according to my own understanding, right, regardless of what the Torah says and what the law is, that's not Torah anymore. You're outside the boundary. Once you're outside the boundary, that's it. You will disappear. Right? It's only a matter of time. If it's not in this generation, it'll certainly be in the next generation. If not the next generation after that. It's not going to be that far down the road. Because the more watered down it goes, the more I understand, the more I understand, it just gets silly because, you add on things that have nothing to do with Judaism, have nothing to do with Torah. Right? You're doing it because this is what I understand. Torah is not about what I understand. Torah is what is about absolute truth. What God tells me I have to do. So they say, oh, so you are subservient to this God, who's anti this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, I am subservient, 100%. Doesn't mean I always do what I should do. It's because we all have an evil inclination. But in an ideal sense, that's exactly the case. So you want to say, oh, you're this and you're that, you're the other thing. Okay, so you blame the Torah. So you say the Torah, so say the Torah, not me. Because I'm the one who follows the Torah. So then you have to tell me why the Torah is not true. Prove to me the Torah is not true. And for most people, as we mentioned before, it's not about whether it's true or not. It's a question of how much it inconveniences my life. Because, oh, come on, you really believe that? It just shows how far away people are, from the truth, because they're so steeped into desire. Their desires destroy any clear thoughts that they may have and go against a proper life that they, even in theory, right, would want to set up. Because it's inconvenient. Right, discussion, I'll just end with this. I had a discussion, someone made a comment about something, and and they were annoyed, and they were annoyed about a certain thing, about the Orthodox community, or a specific Orthodox community, and, they were going on and on. So I said, just say you were inconvenienced, and that is what your argument is. Don't tell me they did this. Don't tell me there's no such law. Don't tell me all the other stupid things. Tell me I was inconvenienced, and I didn't like it. That's what I want to hear. And in the end, they admitted it. They said, yeah, I was inconvenienced. Okay? That has nothing to do with Torah. That has nothing to give you a right to badmouth the Orthodox community because you were inconvenienced. That's what's lacking in this store. That's what's lacking in this generation. It's proper understanding of what's there, why we do it, and what the purpose is. I just want to remind people, I also have a course called Discovery of Biblical Path, 6 modules about a non-Jew coming out of idolatry. They don't know which path to go. They want to convert, or they want to be a Noahide. So I explain what it means to convert, go through some of the holidays, oral tradition, also what it means to be a Noahide, how to find a rabbi for, to be a Noahide or a community, either for a convert or a Noahide. At the same time, trying to find, what's going to happen, with my family if I convert or I don't convert or whatever the case is. I also have 7 interviews with people who already either converted, in the process of conversion, or stayed as Noahites, called Discovery of Biblical Path. You can find that on my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or my blog, orthodoxconversion.com. I also give conversion classes, give Noahide classes. I have 2 question and answer sessions, one on Tuesday at 10 a.m. New York time, one on Thursday, 2 p.m. New York time. I have an intro to Kabbalah class every Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, and that we go through the book of Derech Hashem, the way of God, about why God created the world, purpose of man, purpose of the nations, spiritual forces. We're going through prayer now, Shemona Esrei, the Amida, Tefillin, Tzitzis spoke about, and every other Wednesday night, won't be this week, be next week, I do controversial issues on Tanakh Talk, T-E-N-A-K, T-A-L-K. You can search my name there, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman, and see videos I've done there. Anyone wants to contact me, can contact me at rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.